Mr. President, at the outset, let me thank you for convening this annual open debate today on the important theme of protection of civilians in armed conflict. The world is witnessing a surge in armed conflict, and the civilians continue to be victims of such conflicts. It's highly alarming to see that in 2024, as per ICRC records, the number of victims affected by armed conflict has increased, with 56,000 cases registered of missing persons alone. It's a paramount responsibility of the national governments to create a conducive environment where civilians are safe and secure. While we acknowledge the national responsibility, we should not ignore the adverse impacts of all forms of terrorism, including those emanating from across borders in today's debate on protection of civilians. It is needless to mention that the terror entities have gained significantly enhanced capabilities by having access to new and emerging technologies, which present us with new threats, particularly to the civilian populations. In this regard, the efforts of the Council and of the international community should be directed at assisting national authorities in developing capabilities and capacities to protect civilians. It's unfortunate that the parties to the armed conflicts continue to attack civilian populations, particularly women, children, and other vulnerable groups, as well as indispensable civilian infrastructure, such as hospitals, by projecting them as legitimate targets. Regrettably, during armed conflicts, civilians, including women and children, are used as human shields for military operations and terrorist activities. Therefore, it is paramount that the international community resolves to take concrete actions towards the implementation of relevant Security Council resolutions that have been previously adopted. Mr. President, any attack on civilians and humanitarian workers is a grave violation of international law, in particular international humanitarian law. The existing legal framework concerning the protection of civilians cannot be overlooked. Respect for principles of the UN Charter, including sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states, should remain the basis for all actions taken by the Council for the protection of civilians. A politically motivated decision to intervene in an armed conflict situation may have devastating consequences, including to the civilian population, and therefore must be prevented. Furthermore, any intervention must be proportionate and based on credible and verified threat perception. The Council and the international community must take necessary measures to ensure effective and timely protection of civilians, including their life, dignity, and rights. The core principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence must continue to guide the operations of all humanitarian agencies and organizations. Mr. President, I am constrained to respond to the baseless allegations of the representative of Pakistan on a number of issues. First, India has experienced decades of Pakistani-sponsored terrorist attacks across our borders. This has ranged from the horrific 26/11 attack on the city of Mumbai to the barbaric mass murder of innocent tourists in Pahalgam in April 2025. The victims of Pakistani terrorism have been predominantly civilians, since its objective has been to attack our prosperity, our progress, and our morale. For such a nation to even participate in a discussion on protection of civilians is an affront to the international community. Second, Pakistan has repeatedly used a civilian cover to advance the cause of terrorism. We just recently saw senior government, police, and military officials pay respects at the funeral of noted terrorists targeted by Operation Sindoor. A nation that makes no distinction between terrorists and civilians has no credentials to speak about protecting civilians. Third, earlier this month, the Pakistani army deliberately shelled our border villages, killing more than 20 civilians and injuring more than 80. There was intentional targeting of places of worship, including gurudwaras, temples, and convents, as well as medical facilities. To preach at this body after such behavior is grossly hypocritical. Let us be clear. Protection of civilians should not serve as an argument for protection of UN-designated terrorists. The international community must come together on zero tolerance for terrorism and calling out those who sponsor and defend it. In conclusion, Mr. President, my delegation reaffirms its commitment to working in close cooperation with the international community to alleviate the suffering of civilians affected by armed conflict. Mr. President, we are constrained to respond to the disinformation being carried out by the delegation of Pakistan with regard to the Indus Waters Treaty. India has always acted in a responsible manner as an upper riparian state. I would like to highlight 4 aspects to expose the disinformation of Pakistan. First, India entered into the Indus Waters Treaty 65 years ago in good faith. The preamble of the treaty describes that the treaty was concluded in a spirit of goodwill and friendship. Throughout these 6.5 decades, Pakistan has violated the spirit of the treaty by inflicting 3 wars and thousands of terror attacks on India. In the last 4 decades, more than 20,000 Indian lives have been lost in terror attacks, the most recent of which was a dastardly targeted terror attack on tourists in Pahalgam last month. India has shown extraordinary patience and magnanimity throughout this period. Pakistan's state-sponsored cross-border terrorism in India seeks to hold hostage the lives of civilians, religious harmony, and economic prosperity. Second, in these 65 years, far-reaching fundamental changes have taken place not only in terms of escalating security concerns through cross-border terror attacks, but also growing requirements for producing clean energy, climate change, and demographic change. Technology for dam infrastructure has transformed to ensure safety and efficiency of operations and water use. Some of the old dams are facing serious safety concerns. However, Pakistan has continued to block consistently any changes to this infrastructure and any modifications of the provisions which is permissible under the treaty. In fact, in 2012, terrorists even attacked the Tulbul navigation project in Jammu and Kashmir. These cynical acts continue to endanger safety of our projects and lives of civilians. Third, India has formally asked Pakistan to discuss the modifications of the treaty on several occasions in the past 2 years. However, Pakistan continues to reject these, and Pakistan's obstructionist approach continues to prevent the exercise of full utilization of the legitimate rights by India. 4, it is against this backdrop that India has finally announced that the treaty will be in abeyance until Pakistan, which is a global epicenter of terror, credibly and irrevocably ends its support for cross-border terrorism. It is clear that it is Pakistan which remains in violation of the Indus Waters Treaty. Thank you, Mr. President.